What's up guys, Specstar here today with a special video that I spent a lot of time on. I made a whole slideshow covering Draft League 101, what you should know when getting started by Professor Dr. Specstar Esquire. So basically what I'm doing in this video, in this slideshow, is I'm looking at all the basics of Draft League format and trying to use my experience to kind of help you guys get started if you're new to this, or if you just feel like maybe there's a way you can elevate your game or learn something new. So I did spend a lot of time making this slideshow, so if you guys do like it, please like, comment, subscribe, it means a lot to me. And I'm gonna get started on this. Introduction. Pokemon Draft League is the combination of competitive Pokemon and fantasy football. It was created by Magnitude, also known as Steve, also known as Battler X. You draft 10 to 12 Pokemon, and from that build a team of 6 aimed to counter the mons your opponent has. To me, Draft League is the highest form of competitive Pokemon, as it has the most strategic elements to it, and you generally put the most thought and preparation into one battle. My background. So you're probably wondering, who's this handsome bum and what makes him qualified to teach Draft League? Well, I've been playing Draft League for almost 2 years. I played hundreds of Draft League games in just about every format around, and I've won many championships. My career playoff winning percentage is above 95%. That's really when I bring my A game, and I've had my best record when it really matters in the playoffs. Draft League formats. There are quite a few actually. There are many different ways to play Draft League format. Now the main one is the GBA 5-tier system. As I mentioned, this is the most common one you will see. In this format you have mons organized into 5 tiers and megas organized into tiers of their own. There's also free drafts. In this system, you can just draft whichever allowed mons you want without a budget or tier system. And there's point drafts. In point drafts, you have an allotted amount of points and purchase mons based on their price to build a team within your budget. Draft League formats part 2. There's also the UCL/Smokin' style. You draft Pokemon tiered based on their Smokin' singles tier. This style is generally not accepted in the Draft League community as singles tiers don't do a good job measuring Draft League value. Now I'm going to give an example here. I believe Necrozma is down in rarely used right now, which is the second lowest tier of the core 4. But in the GBA type tiering system, you'll generally see Necrozma as a tier 1 Pokemon. So it really doesn't match. Also with Slowbro, I believe that's an NU Pokemon, which is the lowest of the core 4. And generally in the GBA system, you'll find it as a tier 2. So while actually I did get my start playing UCL. That was the first type of leagues I played, and I did have some fun with them. But if you're looking to build a league with the biggest strategic element in the most fitting tier system, it's probably not going to be that. Now, others. Among the many others is a GBA-like tiering system with an added S tier above tier 1, which usually has things that are often banned, and systems with more tiers than just 5 or 6. So I've been seeing a league going around that had 8, I believe, and you can find ones with more than that. A lot of them will go into real nuance and just have a bunch of tiers with different prices to try to be as accurate with evaluating Pokemon as possible. Those aren't the most common, but you will find them here or there. Next topic is cores. Cores are mons that are drafted together on a team to function with synergy. They come in both offensive cores and defensive cores. Offensive cores function to allow you to hit mons of different types in different defensive stat distributions, i.e. defensive, specially defensive. Some common examples are Charizard Y and Tyranitar, Tapu Bulu and Magnezone, in Heatran and Latios. And they work like Charizard Y hits what Tyranitar doesn't, Magnezone traps Steel types and lets Bulu spam Grass attacks. Heatran beats down the Steel types and the Fairies, which can take Latios' Draco Meteors. Basically just things like that. Defensive cores function to let you take hits from different kinds of mons. Some common examples are Mega Sableye and Blissey, as you see up top, Florges and Mega Aggron, and Tangrowth and Slowking. Regenerator cores are really a pain to deal with if you don't have the mons to break them. We're going to do cores part 2 now. There are 2 common type cores, Fire, Water, Grass, and Fairy, Steel, Dragon, as you can see illustrated above. These are trios where each type covers the weaknesses of the others. The prime function of these cores is defensive compatibility. These mons are meant to be able to switch in on the things that force the others out. This is often misunderstood, and you'll see mons like Infernape added to Fire, Water, Grass cores when it can't really safely switch in on much. Good Fairy, Steel, Dragon cores are easier than Fire, Water, Grass cores to build because there aren't many good fire types with bulk. There's Heatran, and that's the big one, but there aren't really too many others. Rotom Heat's one, I guess. Things like that, but they are limited, so it's definitely, if you get a shot to splurge on Heatran earlier, that's a good way to have a viable Fire, Water, Grass core. With its Steel type, it can also contribute to the Fairy, Steel, Dragon. Now I'm going to talk about speed tiers. A common factor in drafting is your speed tiers. When drafting, you want to have mons of all sorts of speeds. The reason for this is because in Draft League, a mon usually won't just have 252 speed. It'll probably be built to be 1 speed faster than one of your mons. An example is if you're facing Mega Lopunny and your fastest Pokemon is a base 100. Then Lopunny can be adamant with only 92 speed EVs and outspeed your whole team. This means Lopunny can not only be adamant but invest 164 EVs in bulk and be a bigger problem for you to deal with. The more diverse your Pokemon are in speed, the less likely it is your opponent will be able to invest much in their offensive mon's bulk. Speed tiers are not necessarily the top priority when deciding. It's not necessarily the top priority, when deciding which mon to take, but they're definitely worth consideration. Now I'm going to look at Tier 1, or in points, the Tier 1 mons usually go for 13 to 20 points. Tier 1 Pokemon are your stalwarts. These mons are generally good in almost every matchup. Almost all of these mons in here are offensive, and Skarmory is one of the exceptions. Clefable's another one. A lot of the offensive mons here are the ones with both speed and power, as well as the better setup sweepers. Generally in Tier 1 you're going to look to start an offensive core. And you see some examples down there, Koko, Landorus, and of course Skarmory. Tier 2, or in points usually 10 to 14. Tier 2 has most of the best defensive mons, and the next best offensive mons. Often you'll find offensive mons who have one of speed and power but lack the other. You'll also find mons here with a lot of upside that are plagued by a 4x weakness. Buzzwole and Ferrothorn, for example. Also, you got your Magnezone, your Nihilego, things like that. Very often, you'll either look to start a defensive core here, or find a role filler to contribute to your offensive core. Tier 3, or in points, 8 to 12 points generally. Tier 3 has a lot of mons who perform specific roles. For example, your clerics, dark type / pursuit trappers, hazard control, weather setters, and weather abusers. You can expect to take something matchup driven which has a very clear role. And we see some examples here, Torkoal and Pelipper set up the weather, and Empoleon the best defogger. Tier 4, which is generally points 6 through 9. A lot of Tier 4 is Mons who are too offensive for Tier 5. Usually in Tier 4 you're going to look for a Mon who can score some KOs in the right matchup. Generally you'll find something that can do a lot in a little, not a little in a lot. We see Virizion and Kofagrigas as some examples below. Now Tier 5, and that's going to be points 1 through 6 usually. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Tier 5 is the Mons who aren't good enough to be in any other tier. Generally down here I try to look for Pokemon with a very specific niche. This can be something like Quagsire as an unaware wall, Barbaracle as a shell smash sweeper, or Alolan Exeggutor as a trick room abuser that can use Z moves. And generally you're going to find that's valuable in leagues that have Z rules like the GBA, because if you take a tier 1, then your other Z users can have to be a tier 5, and Exeggutor can actually make use of them. We see the examples below as mentioned. Now I'm going to talk about Megas. Megas vary system to system. In point system, they can either cost nothing or have prices just like the other mods. In GBA, the better ones cost nothing and the worse ones give you extra points to spend on your free Pokemon, which is to say, you draft Pokemon based on tiers and then you have points you can spend on your last 4, and if you take a low tier Mega in the GBA, you have extra points to spend on those final 4. I personally would never take a tier 3 or a tier 4 Mega in GBA tiers. Generally, I'm going to go for a tier 1, but if a tier 2 Mega is good like Slowbro, I'll strongly consider it. As those of you who have watched me and seen me use Mega Slowbro know, I tend to think the different tier 1 Megas are somewhat similar in value, so while many like to take a Mega early and build around it, I tend to grab my T1, T2s first, and then grab a Mega that goes with the team later. That's just my preference. Different people like to do different things with it, and of course unbans can change that potentially. Speaking of unbans, sometimes mons that are usually disallowed will be allowed by certain leagues. Some common examples are Tapu Lele, Magearna, Mega Kangaskhan. You can also see stuff like Floette Eternal, certain Greninja abilities, things like that. Sometimes in tiered leagues, these mons are in an S tier of their own. Generally, they're going to be the first to get drafted. Allowing them or not all comes down to preference, but make sure you know what's allowed and what isn't when you're drafting. You definitely want to know what your options are. Now we're going to talk about Z rules. One differentiating factor between league rules is how Z users are handled. Some leagues allow you to choose a certain quantity of mons and they can use Z moves. For example, you draft a team and then you can pick maybe 3 of the Pokemon you took to use Z moves. Some leagues allow you to have Z users within a certain point budget. So like you take your team and then you have like, I don't know, maybe you have 30 points worth of Z users or something like that, and you just pick based on the mons you have who fall into that budget. Some leagues just let you use Z on anything, but those are less common nowadays. Knowing your Z rules can change the value of certain mons who benefit from Z capability. For example, Tornadus and Scolipede, and there's also Dragonite and Volcarona, a few others. Playstyles. There are a few different playstyles you can draft or build with. Here are the most typical styles. Hyper offense. On hyper offense, you're going to find little defense on the team. The goal is to overwhelm your opponent and make optimal use of switch initiative. Traditionally, HO has little hazard control but tends to like having rocks. HO can abuse webs or hazard stacking. If it does, it will often have a defiant user such as Bisharp to discourage or abuse the opponent from defogging the hazards away. Because if you don't know what Defiant, Defog will decrease your evasiveness, and with Defiant that will increase your attack by 2. The next style is bulky offense. Bulky offense differs from HO in that it typically has a small but strong defensive core. Often it will have decent hazard control and hazards of its own. The next style for playstyle part 2 is balance. Balance teams have components of both offensive and defensive teams. They will have fast offensive mons, stall breakers, and walls. They will have strong hazard control and multiple rock setters. Usually they will also have other hazards such as spikes or toxic spikes. And the last style is stall/semi-stall. The difference being stall is all the way on the bulky spectrum and semi-stall is most of the way there. So basically stall teams just more bulk. Stall is rare in Draft League because it's harder to pull off when your opponent knows what they have to break. However, it is done. I have a friend called Manny who swears by stall in Draft League. He says that the key to pulling it off is preparing as if you're going to face all 11-12 mons your opponent has. Stall is a wall of every kind, a plethora of hazard control, multiple types of hazards. Stall and Draft League will almost always take Clefable, and they'll probably take it early like round 1 because they can't risk losing out on it. It may also take Quagsire. It will likely also have Pursuit Trappers. Now we're going to talk about drafting. You need to draft in a way that makes you comfortable. The playstyle that you're most comfortable using, the mons that you're comfortable using. Now this isn't to say you should avoid spreading your wings and branching out, trying new things, but you're always going to do best with what you're most comfortable with. The mon that is best for me is not the mon that's best for you. For example, I once had a season where Blissey had more KOs for me than Magearna. A lot of people swear up and down that Blissey is a bad tier 2, but it meshed with my playstyle. In fact, there was once a game where I was going up against Mienshao, and I knocked it out with my Blissey because I had the Chople Berry and counter, and I got it going for high jump kick. When drafting, it's important to have a way to take every hit and break every wall. If there's one mon on the team you can't deal with, then your team is flawed. Now, to varying extents. Of course, there are going to be some mons that most teams are going to have a hard time walling, and that's going to be things like your Mamoswine. But generally, you want to be able to deal with as many things as possible. So you want to have a good diversity in your team, a bunch of things that handle a bunch of different things. You don't want to be really up shit's creek without a paddle when it comes to facing anything. Now the next topic is team building. Team building is the hardest topic to cover because you will learn the most about team building through building yourself and using the teams that you build. I'm still getting better at team building through experience myself after hundreds of times doing it. You need to be ready for anything your opponent can bring, offensively or defensively. I have a video in the description where I built a team live for a battle. I recommend you watch it to see what goes into building. I'll have another live team builder soon. Always double check your sets. Make sure your abilities and moves are right. In my live builder, I actually forgot recover on Avalugg. You will screw up sets here and there, but you can mitigate it by double checking. Hell, triple check. For the important battles, have a friend look over your team. You can never be too prepared, really. Now, battling. For battling, the most important thing is envisioning your path to victory. I start visualizing my path to victory from team matchup and recalculate it every few turns. You'll get better at this with experience. I know I definitely used to just go into battles Leroy Jenkins style, just click moves and do what was better for the turn. But now I start to think about the long-term rate from the start. It's also crucial to envision scenarios where you lose and one by one eliminate them. A common mistake people make is when things are in their favor, creating a losing scenario where one doesn't exist. You can see this in the GBA Season 4 Championship, link in the description. Dan created a losing condition for himself by not clicking taunt with his Mew on the double 8. It can happen to anyone if they're not careful for 1 second. Take your time, think clearly, and make good use of the damage calculator in the description. Calculate your damage and your opponents to figure out their bulk and their offensive investment. You can learn a lot from that. Draft League Etiquette. There are a few traditions that exist in the interest of keeping draft leagues cordial and to show respect between opponents. It is a tradition to say GLHF or good luck, have fun before a battle and respond with you too. It's also customary to say GG at the end of each battle, which is of course a good game. It's frowned upon to forfeit at the end of the battle. It messes with stat collection, i.e. each mon's KO count, and it can appear bitter. Leaving an active league is a big no-no. If you join a league, you should be prepared to make a commitment to it. If you must leave, then it's best to find someone to replace you so that the league can keep running smoothly and it isn't the league's burden. Losing. Losing sucks. There's no two ways about it. You're very often going to feel terrible after a loss. However, it is important to lose. You need to lose to learn how to win. A lot of growth comes from losing. So as much as it may suck, you need to think of losses in terms of what you can learn from them. I've had many tough losses in league format, and they've only made me better. Now, finding a league. If you read this and you think, hey, I want to find me a league to try out some of this stuff and do it. If you want to find a league, you can join. There's no better place to find one than the GBA's Discord's other league channel. Link in description. You can find leagues, get advice, chat with people of a similar hobby, find all of the GBA's uploads, and learn about Draft League. A lot of people do join and then leave for that, but I definitely recommend staying. It's an enjoyable server. You can catch battles. It's one of the better Pokemon Discord servers, I think. Lastly, the conclusion. If you made it this far and watched the whole thing, I do love you. If you have any questions, comment them below and I'll try to answer them. And let me know if you guys like this video. If it does well, I'll make more videos covering some of the topics such as drafting and team building closer. I hope you learned something from this and are encouraged to try some of this out yourself. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Have yourselves a good night.